They called it the Mustang, sleek, fast, and deceptively unremarkable at first glance. But in 1944, a hidden upgrade transformed it from a capable fighter into a speed demon that stunned everyone, especially its enemies. Germany's top engineers, used to fearing every Allied advancement, never saw this one coming. They studied Spitfires, they feared Me-262s, but they underestimated the power of fuel. At high-altitude bases in England, American technicians began experimenting with 150-grade aviation fuel, a supercharged blend that pushed engines beyond their supposed limits. They didn't set out to break records, they just wanted more speed, more climb, more edge in the sky. The P-51 Mustang, already agile and reliable, received that fuel and everything changed. It didn't just fly faster, it roared past expectations. 490 miles per hour at altitude. An astonishing speed for a propeller plane in the jet age. German radar operators blinked in disbelief as Mustangs streaked across occupied airspace, appearing from horizon to horizon, climbing so fast bomber escorts couldn't keep up. They had expected raids, dogfights, guns, but not this. The German engineers analyzed wrecked Mustangs, tried to reverse engineer the modifications. But fuel chemistry was a battlefield they couldn't see. They measured cylinder heads, pistons, turbochargers, but still couldn't replicate the performance. The secret was not just hardware, it was the invisible energy coursing through the lines. They tested captured fuel samples, measured octane levels, additives, compression ratios. They realized their own engines, superior in build but limited by fuel, could never match that magic blend. In the skies above Germany, Mustangs became legends. They battered ground targets, escorted bombers deeper than ever, chased German fighters away from their own territory. German pilots whispered about ghost birds, aircraft that moved too fast to track, too agile to catch. Even elite units like the Luftwaffe's Jagerschwader struggled to adapt. They had powerful engines, great aerodynamics, but they lacked the fuel, the logistics, the invisible advantage that the Mustang now held. In the final months of the war, the skies over Europe were no longer contested, they were dominated. Bombers flew deeper. Fighter sweeps struck harder. And the Mustang, fueled by that 150-grade secret, carved a corridor of Allied air supremacy that nothing could breach. After Germany's defeat, Allied engineers documented every detail: flight logs, engine curves, pilot testimonies. They built future aircraft around that same principle. Maximize what's inside the tank, not just the hardware it powers. To this day, aviation historians marvel at that moment, when fuel turned a good aircraft into a legend. The Germans never expected it, but the Mustang never asked permission to fly faster. The first time the new 150-grade fuel was tested in combat, even the pilots couldn't believe what their instruments were showing. The needle on the airspeed indicator kept climbing, 420, 450, then past 470 miles per hour. Engines that once strained near their red line now screamed with new life, smooth and relentless. In the air, that sound was terrifying. German pilots described it later as a metal storm, an unbroken howl that cut through cloud and flak alike. The Luftwaffe aces who had ruled the skies for years suddenly found themselves hunted. The Mustang's new power wasn't just about raw speed. It changed the geometry of the fight. Before the upgrade, German fighters like the Bf-109 and Fw-190 could dive away, relying on superior climb and acceleration to escape. Now they couldn't. The P-51s could catch them in the dive, climb faster after the chase, and stay in the air longer. For the first time, Allied pilots didn't just survive the engagements, they dominated them. At 25,000 feet, the thin air once favored the German engines with their advanced superchargers. But with the 150-octane fuel, the Mustang's Merlin engine thrived even there. Pilots reported throttle response that felt impossible. Instant, savage, addictive. Word spread quickly through Allied airfields. Crews whispered about magic gas, about the fuel that bends rules. Ground mechanics worked day and night, draining old stocks, converting squadrons. By mid-1944, the 8th Air Force was running nearly every operational P-51 on the new blend. The effect on German morale was devastating. They began to notice their radar plots shrinking, not because there were fewer enemies but because they couldn't keep up with them. Dogfights turned into ambushes. The German command demanded answers. How could the Americans suddenly outfly their best? Captured pilots offered none. They didn't even know the chemistry behind it, only that their Mustangs had become something else entirely. In test hangars outside Berlin, engineers dissected captured P-51s, searching for the secret. They checked propellers, exhausts, even oxygen systems. Nothing explained the sheer performance. When they finally tested the fuel itself, the truth shocked them: 150 grade octane, something they couldn't produce at scale under constant bombing. The Reich's refineries were barely surviving. Producing such refined fuel was impossible. It was as if the Allies had discovered invisible armor. The same planes, the same guns, but powered by something untouchable. And in war, that was everything. By the time Germany realized what had happened, it was too late. The Luftwaffe was dying, not from lack of skill or courage but from exhaustion. Each new generation of German pilot lasted only weeks. Each new squadron faced an enemy that flew higher, faster, longer. The skies that once belonged to the Reich now belonged to the Mustang. Allied bombers, once torn apart by interceptors, now thundered across Europe almost unchallenged. The P-51 swept ahead of them, cutting through the airspace like a scythe. Oil fields, factories, railways, nothing was safe. In late 1944, a German colonel wrote in his final report, "The enemy's machines are not only faster, they are eternal. They rise and fall like ghosts. We cannot touch them." It wasn't just a battle of wings anymore, it was a battle of chemistry, logistics, and endurance. Every drop of that fuel carried more than just energy. It carried the industrial might of nations working together, outproducing and outthinking an empire that had believed it could win through brilliance alone. And so the P-51 Mustang, once dismissed as just another escort fighter, became the sword that cut through the last defense of the Luftwaffe. When the war finally ended, the few remaining German pilots who survived captivity spoke with quiet awe of the aircraft that ruled the air. One of them said simply, "When the Mustang appeared, we knew the war was lost, not because it was better but because it never stopped coming." Even now, the sound of that Merlin engine on 150 grade fuel remains one of the most haunting in history. It was more than just horsepower, it was the moment humanity learned that progress in war isn't always forged from steel. Sometimes it's brewed in a fuel tank. And from that day on, the world understood. Superiority in the sky isn't about what you build, it's about how far you're willing to push it. In the months that followed, the transformation of the air war became undeniable. Every mission log, every after-action report, every whispered conversation in a smoky pilot's tent told the same story: the Mustang was no longer just a fighter. It was a message that the era of German air dominance was over. The Luftwaffe, once feared across the skies of Europe, was collapsing under the weight of its own brilliance. Its jets were faster, its designs more advanced, but none of that mattered. Fuel shortages, broken supply chains, and dwindling pilots turned the once proud German Air Force into a shadow. Meanwhile, the Allies grew stronger with each passing week. The P-51s now roamed deep into German territory, striking at airfields before enemy planes could even take off. They attacked transport convoys, strafed railways, destroyed bridges, anything that moved, anything that could still resist. For the German soldiers below, the sky became a symbol of hopelessness. Every distant roar of a Merlin engine meant death, precision, inevitability. The sound of the Mustang was no longer the sound of battle, it was the sound of the end. In February 1945, when the Allies began bombing Berlin itself, P-51s escorted the bombers all the way from England and back. No other fighter in the war could fly that distance, fight that long, and return home without faltering. It was endurance that broke the Reich, not just courage. And the secret still sat in the tanks beneath those wings. That golden blend of 150-octane fuel, refined in Allied factories, guarded like a crown jewel. Each gallon represented the combined strength of nations working as one, scientists, engineers, and mechanics pushing the limit of what was possible. When the war finally ended, and the last Luftwaffe aircraft were silenced, Allied engineers examined the wreckage of German jets and fighters. They were advanced, yes, revolutionary even, but they were ghosts without fuel. The P-51s, on the other hand, still roared to life. They flew victory patrols, watched the surrender from above, and returned home to a world forever changed. For the pilots who had flown them, it was more than victory. It was survival, a tribute to the machines that carried them through storms of fire and metal, through skies that once belonged to the enemy. They remembered the first time that 150-grade fuel burned in their engines, the way the aircraft seemed alive, breathing, limitless. It was as if, for a brief moment, man and machine had reached perfect harmony, speed without fear, power without hesitation. And in that harmony the war had turned. Long after the smoke cleared and the factories fell silent, historians tried to pinpoint the exact moment the tide of the air war changed. Some say it was the arrival of radar, others the fall of the Luftwaffe aces. But for those who were there, for those who flew and fought, the answer was simple. It was the day a silver Mustang took to the skies, drank from a new kind of fuel, and became something the enemy could neither match nor understand. It was the day technology, industry and courage fused into one, and the balance of the air shifted forever. When Germany looked to the heavens in those final months, they no longer saw hope. They saw the glint of sunlight off polished aluminum, the streak of contrails at impossible speed, and they heard the scream of a Merlin engine fueled by something more than chemistry, fueled by the will to never stop advancing. That was the day the skies belonged to the Mustang. That was the day the Luftwaffe fell silent. And that was the day the world learned that even in war, evolution never sleeps.